Alright everybody, it's Jeremy Egger with JE Recording, back again doing another, this is hardcore mix breakdown, I guess that's what we'll call it. This one's going to be a little shorter. I'm not going to go through all my routing like I did in the last one, so should be able to blow through this pretty quickly. This set is going to be the Blood for Blood set. Now the reason why I picked this one was because this was performance from the Union Transfer, not the Electric Factory. So Union Transfer is a different setup. The way that we get the signals for this one is that the board itself has like a USB or FireWire connection, and Len will just plug his laptop directly into the board, and we get all the signals basically clean, just post mic pre. So no whatever effects they use in-house or EQ, whatever, we don't get any of that stuff. They're just the flat signals, just gain from the mic pre, and that's it. So it's a lot cleaner, a lot easier to work with. We do have the zoom, same as the other set, where just to give it a little ambiance, fill out the room a little bit. And yeah, so let's go through it. Just want to remind you guys, if you're looking to have me mix, record, master your record, it doesn't matter where you're from in the world, shoot me an email at jerecordingnj@gmail.com, and we can work something out. Same with all the other guys that do these sets. Check them out, and check out all my work in the links below the video. So first, I guess I'll do the same as I did the last time. I'll kind of, because I have an audio track that I print the whole set to. So what we'll do is go through that, and I'll just kind of toggle between what the finished print was, and disabled all the plugins ahead of time that I had, and I'll toggle in and out. You can hear the difference between the fully mixed and fully clean, I guess, versions, and just see how they sound. So let's get into it. So, as you can tell, big difference again. This time, the tracks, though, I think the source tracks are a little flatter, just because, like I said, we're not getting any of the stuff off the board, whereas the Electric Factory, there may be some pre-EQ and compression that we get from the signals coming in, because those are aux sends, but not from Union Transfer. So, I'll just quickly go through each of my plugin settings for the individual instruments, and just so you guys see here, the way we get the Union Transfer stuff too is a little more, I guess, traditional way I would record things. So you have a kick in, 2 kick mics, snare top, snare bottom, individual toms, hi-hat, overhead over the low tom, overhead over the hi-hat, bass, mic. I still didn't make a bass amp track, and I'll kind of get to that when I get to the bass, just for this set. When you hear it, you'll understand why. Guitar left, right, vocal center, 2 backing vocals, and the zoom track. So this is kind of more, if I were to do a simple, quick like demo recording, that would kind of be how my setup would be anyway. So my template, I imported the kick bus, snare busts, and all the other stuff, because that's kind of how I would handle it in a regular recording session. So let's go through the kick first here. Just make sure I'm on input. Yes. Actually, first I'm going to enable my master bus effects, but once the whole mix is in, I'll kind of toggle them in and out because I do mix with these on from the beginning, but especially the compressor, you don't hear it really working until all the other plugins are kicked in and it's hitting the compressor a little harder. So I'll turn them on for now because I'm always mixing through them as I mix, but I'll kind of show you how they alter the sound once I get the plugins on all the other tracks going. So first let's go with kick. So, as you can hear, kick in really snappy, kick out a little more body. The levels are already pretty set off the board where I like them. There's not on here, but I would have checked the phase relationship between the two. Just put on the trim or whatever and flip the phase on one of the mics and see which sounds fuller. They were both pretty much in phase, so there's no plugins on it. And then I bust them both to a bus. Got the BX console, the SSL console. Now you see this doesn't need as much EQ as the Code Orange set. Just a little filtering off the bottom and top. Oops, turned that off by accident. Some minor compression, just a little bit of snap at around 3.2K, sucking out some of the boxy mids, and then boosting just a little bit of low end, but nothing nearly as extreme as I had to do with the Code Orange stuff, because I at least had a outside mic on this, so I didn't need to like crank the low end. Then that goes into Pro Q2 just to do a little more filtering. So there's still some weird boxiness. With this, I'm able to do the solo mode and get a little more precise, and just add a little tiny bit more click to it. And then in this case, I used the L1 limiter instead of the clipper. And the reason I did this, and maybe I can find a faster kick part here, because I want to say that their drummer for some of the faster parts, can't really find anything right now. So I believe sounds to me like, and I can't say for sure that he's a single kick, not a double kick player, and he does those little like stutter kicks. A lot of times with those, the two stutter hits will be a lot softer than the main hit. So I use the L1 instead of the clipper just to kind of even out the hits a little bit, and I'll go back and play that section again and bypass it in and out. So when you hear those little like doot 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 doot, that kind of, those stutter hits are a little more even with the limiter rather than the clipper, which is just going to clip off the top edge of the signal. So that's why I do the L1 on this rather than the clipper. Snare, like I said, snare top and bottom. Check the phase on it. The bottom snare was already flipped, so I just left them both as is, ran them through a bus. A little flat, pretty loud ring within the snare. So same thing, SSL console, rolling off low end. No, that's engaged, but it's not rolling off any top end. Little compression, and some snap, and some upper mids, and it's trying to suck out a little bit of that ring at around 800. Give it a little bit more body. Next, I'm going into the SPL Transient Designer. I just thought the snare needed a lot more attack, and turn down the sustain a little bit just to get rid of a little bit of that ring. Yeah, I like the SPL Transient Designer, just makes things a little more snappy sometimes. And then ran it through the lo-fi. Why I did the lo-fi instead of the Joey Sturgis clippers, the distortion, even though it's turned up a tiny bit, only a tiny bit, especially when you hear everything in context, it really, again, because it's kind of a flat snare, just really helps it poke through, makes it a little more snappy, a little grittier. So I'll hear that. And I'll play it with the whole drum kit just so you kind of get the context of the lo-fi with the whole kit. So you hear a little bit there, and especially once I kick the mastering limiter in, it just helps it stay in place without losing some of that attack. Toms, I won't really go through much with toms. I mean, it's not much difference than the other thing. Just a little bit of EQ, top end, suck out some low mids. Didn't boost any on the low end on the rack tom. A little bit of compression, just a slight gate. A little more low end on the lower rack tom, and then the floor tom. Basically all the same. A little bit of low end, sucking out the mids, and a little bit of upper mids for attack. You know, pretty much we'll just listen to the tom hits and just tune them a little bit, but kind of copy the settings across and just adjust the frequency points. Hi-hat, again, still a hi-hat. Suck out all the low end and some weird clanginess in the mid-range. I guess I'll play it this time around. So yeah, it's a hi-hat. It's kind of buried. I don't even know why I have it up sometimes, but hey, it's there, so I'll use it. Overheads. So the overheads were slightly out of level. This one, the one over the low tom, was a lot lower. Usually for overheads, what I do is I'll just set one, say the left one here, in mono, or pan it to the center, and I'll EQ it, and then just copy those EQ settings on to the other overhead. So I'm gonna do that real quick. And I'm really just using this for EQ. The expander only comes on when there's no signal. So high pass filter, then just kind of a low shelf up into the lower mid range, and just adding a little top end. That's really it. Getting rid of some clanginess around 6.7K. That's really it. Not using much else within the channel. I just like using these, especially this Plugin Alliance Brainworks one, because it has this, I forget what they call it, TMT. It's supposed to kind of mimic how a real console would act, because not all the parts in two different channels won't have the same tolerances, so there'll be slight variations between the circuits, and they try to model that. So channel 7 and channel 8 won't be 100, even though I have them copied with the same frequency settings, with the same plugin settings. They'll be slightly different, and it just kind of helps it give it a little more stereo spread. And I put them both on so you can kind of hear that. So to me, it just widens them a little bit, gives them a little separation. Drum bus, again, that's just going through API emulation. Now the drum crush is slightly different this time around. Still with the, actually I went with the Trident emulation. Usually I'll kick the drum crush into solo and play around with the knob until something sounds good. I use 1176. I kind of go back and forth between the 1176 and now that the distressor's out, the distressor. 1176 is a little cleaner, but gives you a bit more mid-range. So let's hear the drums with and without the parallel compression. So you can hear the 1176 because it has such fast attack and release. It kind of pumps a little bit more than the distressor, but it's not as distorted as the distressor. So that's why I picked it for this one. Bass. So with the bass, what ended up happening was something screwed up with the bass mic signal, the original one. So we'll hear that. So I'm not quite sure if it was bad cable, bad mic, whatever. It just doesn't sound good, like it's cutting it in and out, a little thin. So I still ended up duplicating it, even though it is a mic'd bass cab, and I wouldn't really necessarily need to create a fake amp track. I did anyway with the bias amp just to help fill it out a little bit because the signal that was coming in wasn't that great. So we'll hear that. So a little bit, slight improvement. Like I said, you're just kind of dealing a lot of times with what you're getting. So the signal wasn't too much I could do with it. So usual stuff here. Virtual mix rack. Let's cut out a ton of the top end because that's where a lot of that crackly noise was coming in. Ran it through a tube console just to beef it up a little bit, and then the SSL EQ. Boosting a lot of the low end, but still doing a high pass filter. That's just kind of a trick you do. Just suck out the super low end, but then boost it with a shelf just to fill out the low end. Cutting out a little bit of low mids. Bunch of attack around 3K. And then kind of similar to what you're doing with the low end. You have a really harsh high shelf, but then, or high cut, but then boosting a shelf a little bit. And then that's going into the distressor. Again, distressor this time over 1176 just because, you know, it's just how it sounds. A lot of people are like, oh, why did you use this instead of that? It's just, especially with the Slate stuff, I'll try one plug-in, I won't get the sound that I'm getting, so I won't fiddle with it too long, just try a different compressor. And the distressor worked better than the 1176 this time. Probably because I was able to slow the 1176 such a fast attack that it kind of grabs the pick attack sometimes. So with the distressor, I was able to set a much slower attack and keep that pick attack coming through. But still a super fast release. And just distorting it a little bit. So let's hear that. And then because I was using the distressor and it pumped a little bit more, just using the L1 just to keep it from clipping. Guitars are next. Pretty simple guitar setup. The guitar sounded pretty good coming in off the board, so there wasn't too much I had to do with them. Basically just use these Kramer channels on both the guitars, but tweak the EQs differently for each of the guitar channels, so you could see just minor level differences in the mid peak. This right guitar just needed a little bit more, so I'll play them with and without. So, as you can hear, the stage left guitar is a little duller, so that's why it has a little bit more of that boost, 2.5 dB at that, and then just cutting out a lot of the low ends because you don't need that chuggy, basically just like sub noise in the guitar cabs to get rid of that. Then that's run through Virtual Mix Rack, again just through the Trident emulation. Just for some harmonic distortion. Then again, same thing as I did with the Code Orange stuff. I run it through a dual mono compressor, so the left guitar, if it gets too loud or goes to like a chug part and gets a little louder, those won't affect the signal going to the right side. That's why I use dual mono compressor, especially for a setup like this where it's just two guitars, nothing up the middle, so the signals the left and right channels can just act independently and even everything out a little bit. So that's the guitars. Vocals. The only issue I had with the vocals is that they were a little low. So.
They done to you. Hey, brother, can you see what they done to me too? Nowhere to turn. Got nothing to lose. You can count on me. Hey, brother, always.
So you can see, I have my Pro Tool set up for VU meters, and actually with the slate, you see there's a VU meter here too. First thing I did was just crank the input level just so it's hitting around 0 VU. That's just always kind of my go-to starting point for a lot of things, just trying to get everything to sit around 0 VU. Then after that, my chain is pretty similar to what I normally do. Go into a compressor with just a fast attack and kind of a quick medium release. Low ratio, and this is just to grab any errant peaks or plosives, whatever you want to call them, just to keep those in check, and then goes into an EQ, and then goes into 1176 just for some general compression, usually hitting it pretty hard just to even the whole thing out a little bit. The trimmer's on here because the vocal mic itself, when I brought it in, it felt like the backing tracks, like the drums and guitars, were getting a little thin. Flipped the phase on it, and then all of a sudden the tracks came back to life. So I left it, with the phase reverse in. Let's say maybe some sections where if he's moving around with the mic, it may sound a little phasey, and that's just kind of the nature of dealing with live recording, that you're not going to be able to keep that kind of phase in check 100%, especially with the vocal mic. Like I said, with the vocal mic, lead vocal mic and the Zoom mic, where he's moving around a lot. It didn't actually have to really deal with that with Code Orange because their mics don't move too much from where they're set up. But with Blood for Blood, since the singer is just a singer and he's running around the stage doing all this and that, you will get a lot of phasiness, and you just kind of have to pick your best option and go with it. I mean, you could kind of automate the sections with the phase up and down, but you know, that's fairly time consuming. And with these, this is hardcore sets, you know, I got so many to do, it's just a bit daunting to have to sit there and like automate all those sections in and out, especially with all the other stuff you got to get done. So I just kind of pick where it sounds best and kind of roll with it. So that's why that phase there is on. So let me play the vocal with it without the that setup there.
They done to you. Hey, brother, can you see what they done to me too? Nowhere to turn. Got nothing to lose. You can count on me. Hey, brother, all we got to each other. World of shit. You know they made us suffer. Hey, brother, all they let us have each other.
There's that, and it goes into Arvox. Like I said, that's just for some general gating. If he's not singing or like puts the mic down, it'll usually turn down the level a little bit. And then the compressor on these is, the Arvox is more like a limiter / compressor, so it's just to bring the level up a lot overall, because like I said, coming in it was quiet.
They done to you. Hey, brother, can you see what they done to me too? Nowhere to turn. Got nothing to lose. You can count on me. World of shit. You know they made us suffer.
So as you can hear with the full context, his level was really low compared to the rest of the band. The side vocals didn't go too nuts. Just, you know, if I need to just do something real quick, and especially for vocals that are not coming in and out all the time, just, you know, cut out the lows and the compressor here, and try and gate a little bit. I'll downward expand the when they're not really singing, just a tiny bit of EQ in the 3K range, just to add a little bit of presence. But I said same thing with these vocals, had to crank the input gain to get them up to near zero VU on the input side. So I said this is just a quick little, because these vocals aren't really the showcase vocals. I just did some general stuff just to even them out and make them fit in.
They done to you. Hey, brother, can you see what they done to me too? Nowhere to turn. Got nothing to lose. You can count on me. If I can count on you, true. Hey, brother, all we got to each other.
So, as you can hear, just get them to sit nicely when they do come in. And lastly, before we get to the master bus, Zoom. Kind of same thing I did with Code Orange, dual mono compressor, just because the Zoom mic's moving around a lot, just if there's any weird level variations. Same concept as the guitars, just keep the sides in check. Goes into the virtual rack again, the same thing with the phase. It sounded better with the phase flipped, so I left that in. And then console emulation, just for some harmonic distortion, beef it up a little bit, and just a tiny bit of EQ. A little 4K, so I got a little 400, add a little low end, low pass and high pass. So let's hear those.
You can count on me.
So you can really hear the compressor once that comes in. The left side evens out more with the right side. So that's why I do the dual mono thing. Alright. So now, let me go back to my mix bus, because in the other video I did it first, but then I kind of realized as I was listening back to it that you don't get the full effect of the mix bus. I mean, like I said, I have these plugins on from the start, but you really hear it more once the final mix is done. If I take this stuff off, the whole mix just kind of goes bleh and falls apart. So now that I got all my other plugins in, I'll disable these two, and you can kind of hear the difference with and without the mix bus processing.
You can count on me if I can count on you. It's true. Hey, brother, all we got to each other. World of shit. You know they made us suffer. Hey, brother, all they let us have each other. Society. You'll never see the side of life I see. let me breathe. All my family on the city street, 'cause they locked me out of your American dream. They lied.
So that's why I wanted to show it to you at the end this time, because when you disable those, after it's all said and done, the whole mix just kind of like falls apart. Compressor.
You can count on me if I can count on you. It's true. Hey brother, all we got to each other.
Hitting between 3 and 5, depending on how high it is. But when that's disabled, I mean, all the levels just get completely out of whack, and that's why everybody uses the SSL bus compressor, some type of bus compressor. And then the rest of the chain is just some tube saturation, a lot of EQ, bus EQ, and some top end, some upper mids, cutting out some of the low mids, boosting up some of the low end, just knocking off a little bit of the sub stuff, and then that goes into the SSL console emulation. So that's really it for this mix. I mean, like I said, there's a lot less going on with this one just because the signals are a lot cleaner, and there's a lot less you have to do than the Electric Factory stuff. You're kind of given a clean slate, and it's a little bit easier to mix. So, like I said, check out my website, check out my mix samples, check out the final video in the link below. And all the other stuff that Sonny does for 856. If you're looking for me to record, mix, master your band, get a hold of me through Facebook, Instagram, whatever, email. And if you got any other questions or comments, just leave them down in the comments below, and I'll try and get back to them. All right, thanks.